For 3 years, I was the perfect wife until I discovered my husband's cruel betrayal. Abandoning me to die for his mistress, I realized I was nothing but a stepping stone in their twisted game. But I didn't fall quietly. With the help of an old flame, I gathered the evidence needed and systematically dismantled two corrupt business empires: the husband who betrayed me, and the woman who provoked my every downfall. Now, they will stop fighting over me only when they read their sentencing in the courtroom. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. 3 years into our marriage, the affection he showed me turned out to be nothing more than play acting. When the knife was held to my throat, I watched him abandon me for another woman. From that moment on, I vowed to make him fall from grace, to send him to prison with my own 2 hands. In the pitch-black surroundings, I could hear the cacophony of noises, the clinking of beer bottles, the rumble of mahjong tiles, the satisfying smell of smoke, and those discussing how to cash in their bets. Miranda Gilbert, another hostage, and I were tied together. They said it was Henry Niles' choice, a duel where only one of us could survive. The warehouse door opened, and as agreed, Henry arrived alone. Behind him, the shrouded sunlight fell on his shoulders, gradually fading as the doors closed behind him. Niles walked step by step towards Miranda Gilbert. "I choose her," Henry said. Niles looked at me. "I'm sorry, Miss Claire Dawson. Your father is overwhelmingly powerful and can surely save you. But Miranda is my only wife." A strip of tape clung to my mouth, making it impossible to speak, even though I struggled. All I could do was cry silently, tears falling drop by drop. 3 years of marriage, and I never wronged him. Yet, he treats me this way, just for the heiress of the Dawson family. Miranda was released, and the tape was ripped off her mouth. I saw her lips move clearly. "You've lost again." The corners of her mouth hinted at a mocking smile. The warehouse door opened once more, and all I could do was watch Henry carry Miranda further and further away. "Should we rip up the ticket?" one of the kidnappers, Sam Brody, asked Rosalia, the lead female kidnapper. "Why rip it up? Of course, we bring her back to the boss," Rosalia said. Rosalia walked over without a word, grabbed the rope binding my hands, and forced me into the car. She ripped the tape off my mouth and mocked, "Henry doesn't want you anymore." The first thing I managed to say after regaining my voice was, "I'm not Miranda Gilbert. I'm not the heiress." I told her, "Kidnapping me won't do you any good. You can't threaten the Dawson Corporation with me. They won't care about my life. Especially Miranda, she'd be glad if I died here." Rosalia half believed me. "If you're lying, I could kill you right now." I raised 3 fingers. "I swear, I'm really not Miranda Gilbert." Rosalia kicked the back seat. "Damn it! How dare you lie to me?" She gripped my arm. "Miranda escaped, but you won't." "No. I have to take you back to the boss." The car stopped. A black sack was pulled over my head. I could tell by sound that I was brought into an elevator. It rose slowly, taking what felt like forever, at least 30 stories high. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened with a ding. The black sack over my head was removed, and harsh light hit my eyes. I raised my hand to shield against the brightness. Through the gaps in my fingers, I saw a luminous, floor-to-ceiling glass window. A figure sat behind the window. That shape felt very familiar. Henry Niles stood up from his chair and turned to face me. "It's been a long time, Claire Dawson," he said. I froze on the spot. All my grievances welled up in his presence, and tears began to fall in a steady stream. It's been a long time, Hughsander. I come from a family of merchants. 3 generations of my father's family have been in commerce. When I was 7, due to a patent my father held, Dawson Corporation had to cooperate with us. That's how I met Miranda Gilbert. With Miranda's help, I was able to attend the same prestigious school as her from childhood. I don't know when it started, but she developed a strong resentment towards me. Maybe it was because the teachers always praised me or because I easily got scholarships. Either way, she began to oppose me in every way. At first, her hostility wasn't so bad. I had seen her bully other girls before, slapping them and locking them in the restroom. If my father hadn't been collaborating with hers, I think I would have ended up in the same situation. So, when I noticed her hostility, I chose to hold back my talents and endure. When I stopped overshadowing her, she started treating me better. But one day, she discovered I had developed feelings for someone, the heir of Xander Enterprise, Hugh Xander. At that time, the only company that could rival Dawson Corporation was Xander Enterprise. Miranda frowned at me, standing on the classroom steps and looking down at me with disdain. Does a nouveau riche girl like you deserve Hugh from a big corporation like ours? Don't you have a mirror at home? Do you even see yourself, daring to like anyone? After that, Miranda started telling everyone she had fallen for Hugh. I knew she didn't really like him, she just wanted to compete with me, to prove her superiority. She even went back to the Dawson house and begged her father to marry Hugh, vowing she would marry no one else in her lifetime. In her father's eyes, Miranda marrying Hugh would be an alliance of two powerful families. All benefit, no harm. Of course, he agreed. But who would have guessed that the Xander family would disagree? Even the lavish gifts the Dawson family sent were returned without a single item missing, leaving them utterly humiliated. All thanks to Hugh. One day, as fate would have it, I passed by the Xander house and saw Hugh kneeling in the rain in front of the door, drenched. I handed him my umbrella to shield him from the downpour. I liked him, so I couldn't help but ask, "Senior Xander, what could make you treat yourself so harshly?" His icy hand brushed against mine as we held the umbrella together, but he tilted it towards me. Niles called his driver over, gave me the umbrella, and stuffed me into the car. Before I left, he said, "The one I love shouldn't have to bear any hardships." I sat there, stunned, as the car started to move. Niles liked me too. Through the dark window, I watched him walk back into the rain to kneel at the Xander family's door again. Apparently, he had been frail since childhood. Kneeling all night led to his hospitalization, forcing his father to call off the arranged marriage. In the end, Miranda didn't succeed. However, not long after, the Xander family suddenly fell from grace. No one knew the reason behind it. When I heard Hugh was leaving the country, I wanted to see him off. But my mother stopped me as I left the house, locking me inside. She said, "The Xander family belongs to a powerful group. There's no need for you to get involved in their spectacle. Even they can be reduced to nothing overnight. This isn't something we can compete with. Claire, forget it." By the time the sunset faded, I realized he must have already left. Meanwhile, another company emerged, the Niles Corporation, controlled by Henry Niles. For reasons unknown, Henry proposed marriage. There was no dowry, no marriage certificate, just a few pieces of paper, a contract. My father feared Henry's growing power and respected his achievements. The contract would be financially beneficial, so he agreed to betroth me to Henry. I didn't resist. After all, if I couldn't marry for love, it didn't matter who I married. On the night of our wedding, I noticed an oil painting of Henry on the wall. The painting depicted me in a white dress, dancing on stage during my university years. Henry confessed that from that moment, he had been smitten with me. I was somewhat moved by his affection and nodded. "I will be a good Mrs. Niles." Henry genuinely seemed to like me. Niles found the best nutritionist for me, constantly changing up my meals, and he knew I hated cilantro. Occasionally, when he came home early, he would cook for me. In the mornings, he kissed my forehead, and during thunderstorms, he held me close. I felt that he cared for me, and since so much time had passed, I thought I should forget the past and start anew. On a stormy night, he held me and softly asked, "Claire, do you have any affection for me?" I nodded and hugged him back. "Henry, I've fallen for you. Please don't leave me." Hugh had left, and I didn't want Henry to leave me too. But after that night, Henry changed. Niles started coming home later and later, and his clothes began to carry a strange perfume scent. Then came my birthday. I waited for him, but he didn't come home, and the dinner I made grew cold. I went out to find him, only to see Henry and Miranda Gilbert kissing. They were so engrossed in the moment, it was impossible to look away. I stood there, unsure of what to do. After they finished, Henry gently stroked Miranda's hair, his expression full of affection. Miranda asked, "Isn't it her birthday today? Aren't you going back?" Henry tapped her on the head playfully. The one I've always liked is you. She doesn't even come close to you. Miranda flirted. She's pretty, aren't you moved? Henry lightly tapped Miranda on the waist, stiffened, but he feigned nonchalance and said, "Were it not for you, I wouldn't even bother with her." Miranda laughed. "She's already fallen in love with you, hasn't she?" Henry nodded. "Of course, she is probably waiting for me to come home for dinner right now." Miranda smiled satisfactorily. "Since she's already fallen for you, reel her in and plan a time to dump her. The humiliation that Hugh caused me, I want her to pay it back. I want her to know what it feels like to be abandoned." Hearing this, I couldn't keep my footing for a moment. So that's how it is. For 3 years, it's just been a farce performed by Henry and me. How disgusting. Before I could even find a lawyer to draft the divorce papers, something unexpected happened. At a business gathering, my father, Mr. Dawson, insisted I come along. During the event, Miranda found an excuse to pull me aside, bringing up something related to Henry. I thought that was fine. Initially, I had no plans to expose them. But since she initiated the conversation, I decided not to hold back. However, just as we stepped out of the restaurant and found a quiet place, someone ambushed us from behind with a stick. When I opened my eyes again, I was already kidnapped. For some unknown reason, the kidnappers were targeting both the Dawson Group and the Niles Corporation. And I was caught in the middle. Miranda, ever clever, woke up and immediately insisted that I was the heiress of the Dawson Group, all while putting on a tearful act. Unfortunately, the kidnappers couldn't tell the difference and gagged both Miranda and me. It wasn't until Henry offered 15% of his company's shares that the kidnappers agreed to release his wife. Without hesitation, Henry took Miranda and left. I was furious. How innocent the first was, yet I had to be toyed with and sacrificed again. Holding back my tears, I gritted my teeth. If I survived this, I vowed never to let Henry and Miranda off the hook. Hugh walked towards me, patted my head, and said to Rosalia, "Thank you very much, Rosalia. Not only did you help me take 15% of his company shares, but you also helped me find my lost love." I was stunned, looking up at Hugh. Rosalia bluntly asked, "She's not Miranda Gilbert. Could she be that old dog Henry's wife?" When she noticed Hugh frowning, she quickly shut her mouth. Hugh's voice was hoarse as he said, "Could you help me take her back to rest first? Claire has always been timid since childhood, and she must have been frightened by this incident." Rosalia nodded and helped me into the car, apologizing along the way. "I'm sorry, Claire," she said. "I really hate Henry so much, and I didn't mean to treat you this way. Besides, my brother and I have just arrived here, and we need to be cautious." I patted her hand. "It's okay. I understand." Later, Hugh told me that Rosalia had originally been named Niles Rosalia, brought up as a boy to inherit the family business. But their father, Mr. Niles, had a mistress and an illegitimate son, Jude Niles. They drove Rosalia's mother to her death, which made Rosalia leave the family and switch her last name to Liam from her mother's side. When Hugh came back, he took off his coat, and I noticed a pendant around his neck. I gently picked up the pendant and examined it. It was wrapped in gold, but beneath it was simple jade, full of cracks and imperfections. It wasn't worth much. Why go through the trouble of wrapping it in gold? I asked. Hugh looked a bit downcast. "When I was abroad, I got robbed. They even had guns. If this pendant hadn't blocked the bullet for me, I wouldn't be here now. The jade was broken, and it was likely what had saved him. If it's shattered, why keep it?" Hugh replied, "Because it was a gift from you. It saved my life. I'll protect you with everything I have from now on. No one can hurt you again." My heart ached. "Hugh. Boss. We're in trouble." Rosalia suddenly burst in. "Henry sold all 7,631 stocks. We've lost a fortune." 7631? I repeated. The stock name sounded familiar. Henry had bought it at a high price, and now he'd sold everything, causing significant losses. Judging by Hugh's expression, it was clear he had bought even more shares. Hugh quickly put his coat back on, his face tight with determination. It's time I had a meeting with him. I'll go with you, I said, grabbing his hand. I had studied finance in college, graduating top of my class. Maybe I could help. The meeting wasn't held at an office but a restaurant. Hugh and I arrived early, and I made a quick trip to the restroom. When I came out, I saw an unexpected face, Henry. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm late, he said. I glanced at him coldly, not responding. Claire, Henry continued, I know you're upset, but Miranda is the only heir to the Gilbert fortune. If I had left her to the kidnappers, her father's retaliation would have been unbearable. I scoffed. Spare me your excuses, Henry. On my birthday, you and Miranda were together behind my back. Did you think I didn't know? You both deceived me. It's not like that. Claire, I married you because of something Miranda said. But after these 3 years, I've developed real feelings for you. It's not just you who has genuine feelings. I regret everything. Henry suddenly hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, Claire. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Let go of me. I struggled but couldn't break free. Then, a strong hand pulled me away, and a familiar scent filled my senses. Hugh! I looked up in surprise. Henry, Hugh said firmly, we're here to talk business, not about my woman. Henry's eyes darkened as he asked, what's your relationship with him? I raised an eyebrow and kissed Hugh on the cheek. This kind of relationship. Henry clenched his jaw. Claire Dawson, you're still my wife. We're not divorced yet. You'll come with me. I was confused until we sat at the dining table, and Henry began to speak calmly. Hugh, you've just returned to the city, haven't you? Still trying to get your bearings? Henry smirked. 7,631's price plummeted. How does that taste? Hugh said nothing, but I could feel his grip tighten around my hand. The Niles Corporation had enough capital to manipulate the market. Henry, on the other hand, was using personal funds to sell off 7631. Which could ruin Hugh's position if the stock didn't recover. What do you want? Hugh finally asked. Henry leaned back, smiling. I want Claire. As long as Claire goes with me, I'll buy back all the 7,631 in your hands at a premium. I will also not pursue the 15% of the shares you took from my company. You're delusional. Hugh smashed his fist on the table. Henry neatly buttoned up his suit jacket and stood up, placing his hand on Hugh's shoulder. Then just wait to be chased out of the market, tail between your legs. Just like the last time, like a dog who's lost his home. I watched Henry's retreating figure and abruptly stood up. Wait! Henry! I followed him. I'll go with you. My hands were trembling, I clenched them into fists. If only you can rejuvenate the stock market. I'll go with you. Henry aggressively slung his arm around my shoulders. It's a done deal then. When we returned home, he kissed my forehead. Claire, from here on, we will walk all roads together. I pushed his hand away. We no longer have a future together. Henry kissed my forehead again. There will be a future. I will make you fall for me again. But all I felt was overwhelming nausea. Miranda heard that Henry had brought me home. She hurriedly arrived at Henry's mansion, ordering me to make some decent dishes for dinner. I turned around without a word and headed upstairs. Miranda rushed over to block me, swung her hand toward me as if to strike me. But I blocked her hand and slapped her right back. Claire Dawson. You dare to hit me. Miranda reached for my face like a madwoman, but was stopped by Henry. Miss Claire Dawson, this is my house. Claire is my wife. Even if I have business dealings with the Gilbert family, I won't allow you to bully my wife. Miranda looked at him in disbelief. Your wife? You said Claire is your wife? Henry, you must not forget that you were originally. Enough! Henry shouted in a low voice. With my current achievements, I no longer need the Gilbert family's support. Fine. Miranda gritted her teeth and said, you'll regret this. And with that, she left. Henry looked like he wanted to explain something to me. But I turned around and went into the room, locking the door behind me. Once inside, I quickly turned on my computer and looked at the rising stock index of 7,631. Thank Henry for keeping his word, the stock market really has recovered. I'm thinking about what I can do to make both the Niles and Gilbert families collapse completely, never being able to crawl back up in the market again. At that moment, the door I had locked suddenly made a sound. Henry unlocked the door from the outside, walked in, and aimed to sit next to me. I immediately shifted to the side and spoke coldly, "Henry, let's divorce." Henry pulled me to him, taking me into his arms at once. "Claire, don't even think about leaving me. Don't ever think about leaving me in this lifetime." Who knows what madness has taken over him, he actually forced me down on the bed and bent down, attempting to kiss me. I slapped him across the face. "If you dare to force yourself on me, I will end my life right before your eyes today." Henry's fist slammed next to me, pulling me up. His eyes were red as he looked at me. "Claire, do you hate me this much?" I stared at him, only wishing for him to get lost. But after a moment's thought, I softened my tone. "I can choose not to divorce you, can stay by your side for the rest of my life, but I have one condition." Henry leaned slightly, touching my face. "You say, as long as I can make it happen." I put my hand on his. "I want to join the Niles Group Corporation. I want to learn risk management." I thought, if I could get into risk management and know how the Niles Group handles stock loss, I would have a chance to find the crimes Henry committed in securities trading. This was my only chance to bring him down. But Henry hesitated. He squatted down to say, "Claire, you studied finance in college, you're not familiar with risk management. It may cause great losses to the company." I glared at him coldly. "You said you would keep your word as long as it's within your reach, didn't you? Are you going back on your word?" Henry said nothing. We both stared at each other stubbornly for a long time. At last, Henry was the first to break down. "Let's meet in the middle. How about you join the finance department in our company?" I hesitated for a moment, pretending to be unsure, before finally giving him my consent, saying, "All right." In reality, I had always wanted to join the finance department. With the company's financial statements at hand, everything would become much easier. Those so-called financial records are the real hard evidence. My relationship with Henry has eased up. He no longer targets me and allows me to visit my parents at home. My father, Mr. Dawson, looks at me, regret visible on his face. Henry regrets dragging me into that banquet that almost cost me my life. I comfort him, "It's all right. Didn't I make it back safely?" My father is somewhat self-blaming. I know that the people of the Gilbert family are all selfish, but I have no grudge against them. Why did they push me to this point? I firmly look at my father and ask, "Dad, since I was 7, you signed a patent contract with the Gilbert family. And our family has been living under their dominance ever since. After all these years, haven't you ever thought about reshuffling the cards? The hegemony of Henry and Gilbert has lasted too long, it is time for a change in the entire business circle." Father's fists clenched and then loosened. Henry patted my shoulder. When Henry and Gilbert join forces, their influence and connections are beyond our imagination. They're not the ones we can provoke. Forget it. My father blamed himself again. The only one to blame is myself. It was me who handed the patent to the Gilbert family. I never thought it would cause the Zander family to collapse. I saw the corners of my father's eyes were red, he closed his eyes. Back then, if the Zander family hadn't funded our patent research willingly, where would we be today? I sighed. I looked steadfastly at my father. "Dad, the opportunity is right before our eyes. The Niles family has suspiciously sold all its shares and bought them back at a high price. This is a loophole, an opportunity to topple the Niles and Gilbert families. If we miss this opportunity, I'm afraid we might never escape from their clutches." After much hesitation, my father finally made up his mind. "All right, my daughter. All right. What your father didn't tell you is that we've developed the second generation of the patented technology that was signed over to the Gilbert family. And we've always kept it. If one day the Gilbert family falls, this technology will definitely help us leap to the top, becoming the commercial titan of the city." I suddenly fell to my knees. "Dad, This patent benefits the country and its people. I want to turn it over to the state instead of keeping it to ourselves to inflate the price, allowing the rich to enjoy it while ordinary people can only watch from a distance." My father stood there, dumbfounded for a long time, then he broke out into a laugh. "You're indeed my daughter, Claire, full of ambition and responsibility. Let's do it as you said." A certain chord in my heart trembled, as if a morning dew had fallen lightly onto the surface of a lake, stirring up ripples with just a light touch. Please wait, for the opportunity is coming soon. An opportunity that would incapacitate the Niles and Gilbert Group. In Henry Niles' company finance department, I had already found a trace. To my surprise, not only were staff from the Niles family working on the accounts, but also people from the Gilbert family were working on them too. Regrettably, the evidence is scant, and the legal representatives of the companies are not themselves, so it's impossible to bring them to justice. I rub my temples in headache. However, Miranda arrives. This time she goes straight into Henry's office and says, "Henry, divorce her and marry me." Holding a cup of coffee, I pass by Henry's office, pause outside, and listen to their conversation. Miranda arrogantly says, "Years ago, my family, the Gilbert Group, was able to support you to become a major business tycoon. Today, we can also send you into a great downfall. I see now that you stand too high and will no longer work for the Moo clan. So, there's no choice. My father, Mr. Gilbert, had to use our marriage to tie you up. If you don't agree, then don't blame the Gilbert family for being ruthless. Don't forget, those shares of the Xander Enterprise back then were from whom?" Bang! The coffee in my hand nearly slipped, spilling half of it on myself. The stock was controlled by the Xander family, it was their biggest portfolio. All Xander family businesses were maintained by the portfolio of those shares. The Niles and Gilbert families dared to secretly plot against them. How utterly ruthless. Inside, there came the sound of a breaking teacup. Henry barked. "Shut up. If things go bad, we'll all go down together." Miranda, terrified by him, could only hold her breath. Coldly snorting, she picked up her bag and left Henry's company. That night, Henry took me back to the mansion and handed me a contract. Divorce agreement. "I'm sorry, Claire, I have no choice." As I expected, despite hearing some of his rare pride at the office door. When he came home, he still wanted to divorce me. The promises he made to win me back were no longer valid. Whoever chases me for the sake of profit doesn't deserve to stay by my side, do they? After all, isn't divorce what I wanted? I just smiled and moved on, happily signing my name on the contract. At the company where I work, Miranda unexpectedly came to cause trouble for me again under the guise of being Henry's fiancée. She stormed into the office, tearing up the account book I had carefully kept, and taunted me. "Claire, what is mine will always be mine. What was true for Hugh back then is true for Henry now. No one can snatch them away." Henry heard the commotion and came over to protect me. "Miranda, that's enough. The Niles and Gilbert families are engaged. And your father has his hand in the Niles family business. What's there to be dissatisfied with?" Seeing Henry come to my defense, Miranda was even more upset and was about to throw her bag at me. I blocked it, grabbed the bag, and threw it back at her. The decoration on the bag hit her forehead, leaving a red mark. Miranda charged at me like a madwoman, but was stopped by Henry, who casually pushed her towards the security guards. "From now on, don't let her in again." Henry was cold and indifferent. He used to be passionately affectionate with Miranda, but now he discarded her like worn-out shoes. Fortunately, I saw through him long ago, so I haven't wasted my deep affection in vain. I gave Henry a blank look, sat back at my desk, and remained silent, hoping he would get out of here quickly. Henry got the message, sighed, and walked out. As I gaze at the pieces of paper all over the floor, I can feel the tension within me easing, a barely noticeable smile lurks at the corner of my mouth. Above were my calculations on the stocks back then, as well as my speculation on the tactics used by the Niles and Gilberts. All shredded? So be it. All the data is in my mind. Thank goodness Miranda is dumb enough to tear these papers herself. Otherwise, if Henry saw them, he would definitely step up surveillance on me. During the time that I worked at Henry's company, Miranda had secretly tried to provoke me twice. But I repelled her both times, and after that, she dared not provoke me anymore. I watched the sky, darkness comes and goes, light waxed and waned. I only hope that Hugh can hold his own in the market and rise again. Suddenly, a piece of news set the media on fire. The host said, the bigwig behind Claire Cultural Company is actually surnamed Xander. Many suspect that it's the return of the Xander family 5 years ago. With such a complex market, has the Xander family really returned? Let's wait and see. I knew it, the opportunity has come. Indeed, in just a few days, the market was in chaos. Several companies under Henry's control were successively seized. Investors holding stocks of Niles Corporation began to sell off their shares, causing a significant drop in the stock price of Niles Group and a drastic shrinkage in its market value. Henry sought Miranda's help, asking her to persuade her father to lend a hand. But the Gilbert family was too occupied to help others. The Gilbert family monopolized both legal and illegal spheres, wielding influence over government officials above and petty hooligans below. With countless people under his control, Mr. Gilbert dominated the market. In this game, no one could be complacent. To protect themselves, the Gilberts spent a lot of money to bind many of their subordinates, purchasing their silence. But what he had embezzled and bribed far exceeded what he had spent. After all, the stock market manipulated by both the Gilbert and Niles families was hard to overthrow. I handed all the collected evidence to the police station. At the same time, I told my father, the technology can be initiated now. The second-generation technology was submitted to the state, widely applied across the nation, and immediately occupied the majority of the market, causing the first-generation technology to stumble. Overnight, my father's company became a leading force in the industry. Before the Gilberts even had a chance to confront my father, the police had already taken him away. When Henry heard about the arrest of the Gilbert and that his own company was just seized again, he was completely disheartened. Henry took my hand, hurriedly shoved me into the car, and drove like a madman towards the villa. Once inside, he opened a suitcase and packed some of my favorite things. Holding our IDs and passports, he said to me, "Claire, my company is in trouble, and the city is in chaos. I need to get you out of here. Once we're abroad, I can provide a good life for you. I will make a comeback, and you will be there with me when I do. Right? Come with me." Before he could finish his words, the police burst through the villa's main gate, guns drawn and surrounding us. "Mr. Henry, Miss Claire Dawson has reported you in her real name. You're accused of accounting fraud, secretly manipulating stocks, and luring others to buy stocks. We need you to come with us." Henry was caught and handcuffed by the police. As they led him away, he looked at me with utter disbelief and teary eyes. A policeman walked up to me and said, "Miss Dawson, since you're with the suspect, could you please come with us for an investigation?" I smiled and nodded, ready to work with them and expose him for all his crimes. The officer then asked, "May I know what your name is for our records, please?" "My name." I cocked my head and smiled, "Claire Dawson." The moment I stepped out of the police station, Hugh was already waiting for me at the door. "Miss Dawson, I have a piece of broken jade. Can you fix it for me?" Hugh asked. I held his hand, nodding without hesitation. "I am wealthy now, I can simply buy you another piece." Just then, I heard a shriek. A woman holding a fruit knife was rushing toward me. I looked and saw it was Miranda, shouting, "Claire Dawson, I want you dead." Hugh shielded me in his arms, kicking away Miranda. Even so, his hand was still scratched by the knife. Miranda lifted her head to look at me, her eyes bloodshot as if she wanted to swallow me alive. "Why? Why you, a nouveau riche's daughter, could have what you love. I've meticulously planned and had a tough time convincing my father to arrange my marriage to Hugh. But because of you, I can't hold my head high in the city. Clearly, I am Hugh's legal wife, yet he protects you at every turn. Claire, you deserve to die," Miranda said angrily. Even though it was private hostility, the passers-by couldn't stand by and watch. Someone immediately called the police for me. Hugh protected me behind him and said to Miranda, "Claire has never been the daughter of a nouveau riche. The Niles family has been in business for 3 generations." By the time it got to her father, he had started researching technological patents. Who would have thought that your father would coerce him and claim this technology as his own? But now, Mr. Dawson has been serving the country and has handed over the technology patents he has developed to the nation. No longer will he be under anyone's control. Miranda, you are now a fugitive. If you really hurt Claire, I'm afraid your jail term will be increased by another 10 years. I watched as Miranda rolled crazily on the ground, shouting, her fingernails filled with bloody mud. I couldn't help but sneer in my heart. She got what she deserved. It wasn't until the police arrived that they restrained her madness and took her away. "Let's go," I said. I took Hugh to the hospital. Luckily, the wound was not deep. After wrapping it in gauze, the doctor said it would be fine in about half a month. When I got home, I took out the newly bought jade, its color faint and transparent. I took off the broken piece he was wearing and put on the good one. Tears involuntarily started to well up. We first met when I was 14. At 16, the bud of love began to bloom. At 18, the affection became indelible. As the rosy clouds at the horizon gradually faded, I lay in Hugh's arms. Through the open TV, a voice echoed, "Having found a confidant, why shouldn't I be delighted?" Half a year later, sitting in my office, I flicked through the trending news. There it was, a name I was all too familiar with. The verdict for the stock case had come out. My father, who was involved in multiple illegal activities, was sentenced to death. Unlike my father, Henry didn't murder anyone and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Miranda was aptly protected by our father, untouched by any of his illicit affairs. But due to her involvement in school violence and bullying, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Later, I heard that after she was released, she was unable to cope with mundane life due to financial pressure and being accustomed to a lavish lifestyle. She resorted to prostitution in nightclubs and eventually contracted AIDS, leading to her death. 1 year later, I stood gazing at 2 large buildings across from my father's company. The people were gone, and the buildings were deserted. The original signs from the Niles and Gilbert corporations that held their 4 large characters were now removed. Only bare metal poles remained. In light of the building crisis and the low property prices, I had long since purchased those 2 large buildings. But for the moment, I simply couldn't think of what to do with them. I gently rubbed my pregnant belly, smiling, "Let's wait until you grow up. We'll leave them as a coming-of-age gift for you."